You're a joke. Wake up. That's what my brother told me at his big promotion party, right before I walked on stage as the founder of the company he works for. In our family, Lucas was the one they polished up on a pedestal. Me? I was always the one they thought had more to prove. And if you've ever had to live in someone else's shadow, maybe a sibling, a cousin, anyone you were never meant to compete with, then this story's for you. Hey there, my name's Tom. I'm 35, and I'm the founder and CEO of Novacore. I'm not the spotlight type. Never have been. You won't catch me chasing microphones or giving flashy speeches about building my company. From the beginning, I made a conscious decision to stay behind the curtain, running the show without all the showy events or polished photo ops that most founders chase like oxygen. Maybe that quiet approach is what made my family think I wasn't going anywhere in life. Maybe that's why I was always the other brother, the uncertain one, the dreamer, the guy they figured would never quite make it. I was raised in a well-off home. We had comfort, support, the kind of family where favoritism wasn't loud or obvious. My parents didn't take sides. They didn't exclude anyone. But they had this deep-seated habit, something so subtle it almost passed unnoticed. They loved to compare. Not in a cruel or humiliating way. No, it was wrapped in soft voices and concerned expressions, like they were handing out advice instead of judgment. Like they thought they were teaching. They'd hold up one child as the gold standard, and use that image as inspiration for the other. Always with the same reason, we just want the best for you. But what they never saw was that, over time, those comparisons didn't motivate me. They didn't inspire me to aim higher. They chipped away at my identity. Slowly, steadily, I started losing track of who I was, outside the image of my older brother, Lucas. He's 2 years ahead of me. From the start, he was the family poster child, cool-headed, sharp, respectful, always dependable. He was the one they pointed to whenever they needed a reminder of how I should be shaping up. My dad was especially guilty of it, probably without even realizing. Every time Lucas succeeded, my dad would glance my way, not angry, not loud, but with this look that built an invisible wall between us, and say, "How do two boys from the same family turn out so different?" My mom was softer in her tone, but the message always rang clear: if your brother can do it, then why can't you? I don't remember the exact moment the comparison started. Maybe it was a parent-teacher night when I was still a kid. Or the time we played sports together and he won, again. But what I do remember, crystal clear, is how it felt, like I was never really seen as me. Every little thing I did, no matter how good, was held up next to one measuring stick, Lucas. Even when I brought home something they were proud of, the praise had a ceiling. It usually sounded like, "That's great, but your brother managed that too, without a study group." I remember once when I topped my class. Dad gave a nod, then casually asked, "Was the test hard? Your brother got a perfect score on that back in the day, and he didn't even study with anyone." I don't believe they ever meant to tear me down. In their minds, I think they genuinely believed they were giving me someone to look up to. A target. A challenge. Something to aim for. But what they missed was this: the older I got, the less it felt like I was trying to become a better version of me, and more like I was just trying to not be less than him. There was a time I truly believed that once we grew up, started our own lives, got married, had kids, those comparisons would fade. But I was wrong. Even after I had a wife, kids, and a steady life of my own, I still heard the same recycled lines at family get-togethers: "Lucas's kids are always so well-behaved," or, "Why don't you try doing it the way your brother does?" And like always, I'd smile politely, give a quiet nod, and take the comment without a word. It had become routine, one I'd gotten used to ever since I stepped into the working world. Back in college, those digs still stung. Sometimes I'd snap back. Most of the time, though, I just swallowed it. But after I graduated and started carving out my own path, something changed. I realized I couldn't live my life trying to prove something to anyone, not even my parents. That's when I stopped trying to become some knockoff version of my brother. I quit chasing the spotlight and set my sights on building what mattered to me. I chose steady over flashy. I worked in the background, didn't care for applause, and didn't need a wall full of trophies to know I was doing okay. And in the end, I ended up going further than anyone thought I would, including them. I still believe my parents never meant harm with all those comparisons. But what they didn't understand was that those words didn't just weigh on me, they took a toll on Lucas too. He started to believe the praise. Got so used to being the top dog that he stopped really listening to people. Began to look down on anyone who didn't take the same path he did. You could see it in his eyes when he talked to people, even me. While he was soaking in his success, he didn't realize I had already quietly passed him by. And what really shook him? That moment 3 years ago when he finally saw what I'd built. And it rocked him. I'll never forget that night. It was a weekend evening, 3 years back, at Lucas's promotion party. He'd just been made director of strategy at a top firm, and the family pulled out all the stops for a big celebration at his place. He invited everyone, our folks, extended relatives, and of course, my wife and me. We pulled up around 6, just me, Jenna, and our 2 daughters. At the time, Chloe was 5, and little Maya had just turned 3. Even though I'd spent most of my life being measured against Lucas, always seen as the one who came up short, I never missed a family get-together. Not once. The comparisons never got so ugly that they felt like real attacks. They weren't cruel, not outright. Just constant. And somehow that made them feel almost normal. When we walked into the backyard that evening, the party was already buzzing. A few cousins waved us over with smiles and warm hellos. Jenna, always the graceful one, took the girls' hands and made her way around to greet the older folks. I walked beside them, offering quiet nods and small talk, just like I always did. As soon as my parents caught sight of us, they came rushing over, arms wide open, eager to scoop up the girls. You could see it in their eyes, like those 2 little girls were the brightest thing they'd seen all day. And right on cue, my mom turned to me with her familiar line. "You really should take a page from your brother's book." I gave a soft chuckle, not because I found it funny, but because I'd gotten used to brushing that kind of thing off. I didn't say anything. Just nodded slightly and let it slide right past me, like always. The evening rolled on. People broke off into little clusters, chatting over drinks and appetizers. I was helping Chloe with her juice when someone at the next table turned and asked, "So, Tom, how's work going lately?" I looked up and answered casually, "It's going well. Actually, I'm thinking about starting something of my own. Figured it's time to take a swing at entrepreneurship." But before I could get another word out, Lucas jumped in. He didn't ask what the business was. Didn't show even a flicker of interest. Never asked how long I'd been planning it or what it meant to me. Instead, in front of everyone, he fired off 2 quick hits. "Get your life together. Wake up. You're becoming a joke." And just like that, the air around the table froze. Conversations halted. No one laughed. No one backed him up. Under the table, Jenna quietly reached for my hand. I stared into my glass, then leaned over and kept cutting fruit for Chloe like nothing had happened. I didn't fire back. Not because I was afraid. And definitely not because I believed what he said. I stayed quiet because I knew that one day, silence would be louder than anything I could have said in that moment. And when that day came, it wouldn't be me who'd have to explain himself, it'd be him. I've always been someone who preferred the background. Not because I lacked confidence, but because I never needed the spotlight to feel seen. But every now and then, life throws a moment at you that won't let you stay in the wings. A moment that pulls you forward, whether you're ready or not. And for me, that moment came at the 10th anniversary gala of Novacor. It was a huge milestone, one that Jason, my best friend from college and co-founder, and I had been quietly building toward for years. From that night forward, I stopped being the nameless guy behind the curtain. My name, Tom, started popping up in tech blogs, social media posts, even industry write-ups I never expected to see myself in. But beyond all of that press and recognition, the real shift came when Lucas found out, finally, that for years, he'd unknowingly been working for me. The gala took place exactly a month after his big promotion party. That night, Jenna and I dropped off the girls with her parents. The event was family inclusive, meant to celebrate employees and the people behind them, and I had a hunch I'd be seeing my own family there. Sure enough, the moment we stepped into the grand ballroom, I spotted Lucas. He was walking in with our mom and dad, chatting away, until his eyes landed on me. He froze mid-step. "What are you doing here?" he asked, almost like the words just slipped out. I had already run through a few possible conversations in my head, so I didn't miss a beat. I looked straight at him and said, "I was invited. They wanted me here to learn more about the company." He nodded. Didn't question it. Just threw out one of his classic lines. Well, that's good. You should keep pushing yourself. Then he turned and walked off with them to find their seats. About half an hour later, things got underway. Jenna and I had just settled at our table when a server came by with dessert. I was cutting into a slice of cake for her when the lights dimmed and the MC took the stage. Her voice came through the mic, crisp and clear. On behalf of the organizing team, we'd like to inform everyone that Mr. Jason Kim, co-founder of NovaCore, will be arriving a bit later due to an urgent matter. So to stay on schedule, we're honored to welcome Mr. Tom Barrett, co-founder and executive strategic advisor, to the stage for our opening remarks. I froze. Knife still in hand. There was just one thought looping in my mind. Why me? From day one, I'd gone out of my way to stay behind the scenes. My title, Executive Strategic Advisor, was vague by design. It gave me the freedom to avoid the spotlight, skip public events, and never once have to give a big company-wide speech. My name was on every internal approval system, sure, but outside of the leadership circle, hardly anyone knew who I really was. Jason handled all the external stuff. Someone even joked once that senior advisor sounded like a made-up position, and I never corrected them. I'd never stepped onto that stage. Never sent a mass email. Never even made a public appearance at a single company event. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like minutes. Then Jenna gently touched my sleeve, leaned in, and whispered, "They're calling you." So I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the stage, under a ceiling of stunned stares. When I reached the podium, I looked off toward the wings and saw Jason standing there. Hands in his pockets. Eyes squinted like he was studying the room's reaction. When our eyes met, he gave me a slight nod and lifted his thumb. Didn't say a word, but that gesture said everything. That's when I realized what was happening. He'd set me up. Not in a cruel way. Not to ambush me. But because he knew I'd never do this on my own. Jason had pulled a small trick on me, gentle, but deliberate. This night, this spotlight, it was mine. And he wanted everyone to finally see me. I took a deep breath, placed my hands on the mic, and began to speak. I stepped up to the podium with the kind of steady calm that comes from spending years running things quietly behind the scenes. It felt surprisingly natural, like this moment had always been in the script, just waiting for me to read my lines. I started talking about the journey, 10 years of it. How it all began with 2 beat-up laptops in a college dorm room and grew into a partner network that now stretches across more than 10 states. I talked about the late nights we barely slept, the close calls where things nearly fell apart, and the handful of people who stuck by us when everything was on the edge of collapse. As I scanned the crowd, I caught a range of reactions. Some people looked surprised. Others smiled. A few gave small nods, like something had just clicked into place, like the final puzzle piece had been sitting there all along, waiting to be set. And then, my eyes found Lucas's. It was just a brief moment. A single second. But it hit like a wave. Everything inside me stilled. He wasn't frowning. Wasn't angry. Didn't look away. But that armor he usually wore, confidence, pride, that always in control look, was gone. Instead, there was something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. They dimmed, like he'd just witnessed something that didn't fit into the world he thought he understood. It wasn't offense. It wasn't even jealousy. It was slower. More shaken. A quiet kind of disbelief. And a flicker of confusion, like his mind had suddenly gone into rewind. Trying to piece together how many signs he'd ignored. How many times he'd seen a project stamped, approved by NG and never once asked who that was. How many meetings he'd sat through, hearing about decisions made by some unseen advisor, only to shrug it off like it wasn't worth investigating. And now, the man standing up there under the lights, wasn't just the kid brother he used to mock. I wasn't the dreamer anymore. I wasn't the could-do-better version. I was his boss. The one signing his paycheck. When the speech ended, I made my way back to our table, let the rest of the evening unfold without drawing more attention. Underneath the tablecloth, Jenna gently reached for my hand. She didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. Her look said everything. "I'm proud of you." I gave her a small nod. Quiet. Just like always. Around us, the room returned to normal, small talk, laughter, background music. But for me, it felt like time had slowed down. As the band started playing during the main performance, my thoughts drifted back, to the very beginning. To that cramped apartment. Those midnight work sessions huddled around the kitchen table. The demos that fell flat in front of stone-faced investors. The unanswered emails. The months when neither of us could afford to draw a paycheck. I remembered all the nights I came close to giving up. Nights where the code blurred on the screen, but I kept typing. Because deep down, I believed this platform could mean something one day. And now, sitting there under soft lights, looking up at the huge screen behind the stage with the Novacore logo shining bright, I realized something. It was all worth it. Every rough patch. Every dead end. Every moment I chose to keep going when no one was cheering. That company, the one that started with nothing, was now valued at close to $30 million. Not because of some stroke of luck, but because of all those quiet steps. All those failed pitches. All those times I stood back up when I had every reason to quit. After the gala, Jenna and I headed home. Our girls were spending the night at their grandmother's, which meant for the first time in a long while, the house was completely still. No little feet running through the halls. No toys clinking across the hardwood floor. Just the two of us, and the soft echo of everything that had unfolded that night. But something kept pulling at me the whole drive home. Lucas. I hadn't seen him again after my speech. He never approached the stage. Didn't mingle with the crowd. Didn't even show up for the group photo at the end. I couldn't tell when he left, just that by the time I stepped down and looked toward where he'd been sitting, his seat beside our parents was already empty. And in the back of my mind, I wondered. Maybe learning the truth, that the same brother he mocked at his promotion party just 1 month earlier was actually the founder of the company he worked for, maybe that got under his skin. Maybe it hit a nerve. Maybe it shook up his sense of control in a way he wasn't ready for. Still, I figured he'd sleep it off. Give it a day. Cool down. What I didn't expect was how deeply it had rattled him. The next morning, just as the clock hit 7, the doorbell rang. Hard. Repeated. It wasn't the kind of ring you give a friend. It wasn't polite or casual. It was sharp. Forceful. Almost angry. I opened the door, and there he was. Lucas. He looked wrecked. His dress shirt was wrinkled and untucked. His breath reeked of booze. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept a minute. He didn't look like a guy who'd just come from a classy black tie gala. He looked like someone who'd spent the whole night fighting with his own reflection. Before I could even open my mouth, he barked through gritted teeth. You piece of shit. You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me. In front of Mom. In front of Dad. In front of everyone. His voice cracked, ragged with fury. He wasn't making sense anymore. His words broke down into shouting, blame, rage. Accusations flew like wild punches, none of them landing, all of them loud. I tried to cut in. Tried to explain. Tried to tell him I didn't know the MC was going to call my name. That I never asked for any of this. Never tried to embarrass him. Never wanted to make him feel small. But it didn't matter. He wasn't hearing any of it. Lucas wasn't just angry, he was unraveling. Years of pressure, pride, and buried resentment were finally exploding at the seams. He lunged, not to hit me, but like he was trying to unload everything he'd been holding back for years. Jenna rushed between us, panic in her eyes. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. And within minutes, there was another knock at the door. The police. That's when I knew, this had gone too far. Later that day, around 5 in the afternoon, I got a call. An officer told me Lucas had sobered up. He was calm again. I hung up, grabbed my coat, and drove to the station. Not because I'd forgotten what happened that morning, God knows I hadn't. But because I figured, if there was ever a right time to forgive someone, maybe this was it. The paperwork didn't take long. When I walked in, I saw him sitting on a bench in the hallway. Head down. Hands clasped. Shoulders hunched. He still reeked of alcohol. His eyes were dull, emptied from a sleepless night. But the fire was gone. The rage had burned out. What was left was something quiet. Heavy. Like he'd spent the whole day peeling away a version of himself he didn't even know he'd built. On the drive home, he didn't say a word. We drove in silence. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the turn signal and the low hum of the air conditioner. Neither of us said a word, until we turned onto the street near home. That's when I heard it, barely above a whisper, his voice rough and tired. I'm sorry. It was just 2 words. But the weight behind them filled the whole car. I didn't need anything more to understand what he was really trying to say. We weren't ready to go home, not with emotions still raw and walls half broken. We needed space. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere without the chaos of everyday life, without kids running around, without the past staring at us from every corner of the living room. So, instead of pulling into the driveway, I made a turn. Took us to a small coffee shop up on the north corner. The same place we used to grab breakfast during our college days. Not because I was feeling nostalgic, but because I knew it would be quiet enough, neutral enough, for us to finally talk like two grown men, without noise, without pretense. We sat there for a solid 30 minutes. Neither of us said much. He just stared at the steam rising from his coffee, hands wrapped around the cup like it might give him the courage to speak. Eventually, he looked up. His voice was calm, slow. "Starting tomorrow, I'm quitting the company." I froze. My first reaction wasn't even confusion, it was shock. I asked him why. And he looked me straight in the eye. No flinching. No hesitation. "I've been lying to myself," he said. "I kept believing I'd earned everything on my own. That I was talented, because I deserved to be. And I didn't realize, until last night, that the person holding me up this whole time, was you." I just stared at him. This was the same guy who once told me, with full arrogance, "You'll never make it doing things your way." And now, here he was, sitting across from me, finally seeing me. Not with resentment. Not with ego. Just honesty. I laid my hand on the table and gently shook my head. "You're wrong," I said. "I didn't help you. Not once." Then I told him everything. 2 years ago, when his resume ended up in our applicant system at Novacor, Jason brought it to me. Asked what I thought. And all I said was, "Follow the regular hiring process. Don't mention me." And that's exactly what happened. Lucas made it through the interview rounds on his own. The competition was tough, but he got the job because he earned it. Every step. Every round. There were times I didn't like how he talked to me, sure. But I never once denied he was damn good at what he did. The promotion he got, Director of Strategy, wasn't some favor. I never pulled strings. Never vouched for him. Never gave him a boost up the ladder. He climbed it himself. And as the founder of that company, I've never been more proud of an employee than I was of him, my brother. Me? I was just lucky. Lucky to be at the right place, at the right time, with the right idea. When I finished, he didn't say a word. He didn't argue. Didn't disagree. His eyes still held that cloudy look, like someone trying to wake up from a dream that had gone on way too long. Like he was just now trying to figure out which parts had been real, and which ones had been lies he told himself. I let the silence hang there a moment. Then I leaned in a little and said quietly, "Okay. If you're still doubting yourself, then here's your shot to prove what you're made of." He looked up, eyebrows raised slightly. I continued, firm and steady, like I'd already made the decision long before. "We've got that big upgrade coming up for the Westside education chain, the one with the user analytics system overhaul. It's yours. You're leading it." I paused. Let it sink in. "I'm stepping back completely. I won't be involved. Tomorrow morning, the entire project packet will land in your inbox. From that moment forward, it's your ship to steer." He didn't respond right away. But something shifted in his eyes. For the first time in a long while, I caught a glimpse of the brother I used to know. The one who stood tall. The one who didn't flinch under pressure. Not the pressure that weighs you down, but the kind you lean into. And that's when I knew. This wasn't me handing him a favor. This was me giving him a clean slate, a real chance to stand up on his own and finally feel what that's like. After the Novacor anniversary gala, something changed in the way my family looked at me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No fireworks. No speeches. Just small shifts, barely noticeable unless you were really paying attention. The way they said my name. The way they asked about my work. And, most of all, how they stopped talking to me like I was still chasing after Lucas's shadow. That shift became crystal clear at my mom's birthday party 2 months later. Same setup as always, the whole family showed up early. We brought the cake from her favorite bakery, just like every year. The table was in its usual spot by the big window. Everything felt familiar, except for one thing. This time, the comparisons had flipped. And the weirdest part? I didn't feel good about it. Midway through dinner, with laughter echoing around the room, Uncle Brian, one of our cousins from Dad's side, raised his glass and said, "Lucas is really talented, and yet, he's just working under Tom. I gotta say, I really admire you, Tom." The air shifted. Conversations slowed. Before anyone could respond, my mom jumped in, her voice upbeat but pointed. "That's right. Tom's our pride now. Lucas still has a lot to learn." I looked across the table. Lucas was smiling. But behind that polite expression, I saw it. A flicker. Something between embarrassment and quiet hurt. He didn't say anything. Just kept nodding like it didn't bother him. But I knew that look. Because I'd worn it 100 times. That was my cue. I stood up, not raising my voice, but just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Uncle Brian," I said, "I need to clear something up." Then I turned to Lucas. "My brother is incredibly skilled. The position he holds, Director of Strategy, he earned it through grit, intelligence, and hard work. I didn't lift a finger to help him get there. If there's any real difference between us," I added, "it's that I got lucky. I started a business at the right time and had it work out. That's it." Then I looked at my mom. My voice softened. "Mom, we're both your sons. Me and Lucas. Please stop measuring us against each other. We're not the same. We each have our own strengths, our own flaws." I looked around the table, kids sitting among the adults, wide-eyed, watching everything unfold. Then I said, "And please, don't compare me to Lucas, or anyone to anyone, especially not at gatherings like this. Not in front of the kids. Because to them, we're heroes. We're the people they look up to. And even the small things we say can stick with them way longer than we realize." The room fell silent. Not an awkward silence. Just stillness. A few seconds later, my dad's younger brother, Uncle David, spoke up. His voice calm. Firm. "Tom's right. We've had this wrong for way too long." Those were Uncle David's words. And hearing him say that, without hesitation, without sidestepping it, something shifted inside me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's shadow. There was no urge to defend myself, no quiet ache pushing me to prove anything. It felt like, for once, everything had fallen into place. After my little speech, the table stayed quiet. Not awkward, just still. Like everyone was letting the words settle in. But slowly, the room warmed back up. 10 minutes later, the familiar buzz returned. Soft laughter floated up here and there, like a silent agreement had been made, that what needed to be said had finally been said, and maybe, just maybe, something inside this family had started to shift. I had barely slid back into my chair, hadn't even reached for my water, when I noticed Lucas walking over. He didn't say a word. Just gave me a small nod, beer in hand, and tilted his head toward the patio. I followed him outside, past the sliding doors and under the soft yellow string lights that lined the railing. It was quiet out there. Private. Far enough from the others that no one could listen in. He leaned against the rail, popped open his drink, stared out into the dark yard for a few seconds. Then finally spoke. "Thanks," he said, his voice low, "for standing up for me in there, and I'm sorry." He didn't add anything else. Didn't try to explain or justify it. Just those words. And that alone carried more weight than any long-winded apology ever could. He took a sip, then turned to me. "You're strong, you know that?" I gave a short laugh, almost caught off guard. But before I could reply, he kept going, slowly, carefully, like he was peeling off years of armor that had rusted into place. "When they started talking about me like I was the one falling short," he said, "I finally got it. What it must have felt like all those years, sitting in that seat. Feeling like you weren't enough. How lonely that is." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, there wasn't a trace of arrogance in his eyes. No superiority. No subtle condescension. Just a brother. Finally seeing the burden I'd carried quietly since we were kids. I gave him a soft pat on the shoulder. "I never needed anyone to stand up for me," I said. "But this time, I think I should stand up for you." He didn't say anything. Just gave me a second nod. Softer. Quieter. But somehow even more real than the first. And maybe, for the first time in both our lives, we weren't standing opposite each other. We were finally standing side by side. Not to compete, but to understand. After that night, things started changing in my family, and not in some dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. The comparisons, the quiet jabs, the subtle favoritism, they all faded out. In their place came something new. Something better. Encouragement. Recognition. A growing willingness to let each person be seen for who they truly were. Lucas stayed at Novacor. 6 months later, he wrapped up the project I'd handed to him that night on the drive back from the police station. Not only did he deliver it on time, he crushed it. The work exceeded our expectations and brought in a strong revenue spike, unlocking partnerships with school systems in 3 new states. He even earned a sizable bonus. But for me, the Real win was something you couldn't measure on a balance sheet. For the first time in years, I saw him believe in himself. Not because of praise. Not because of the family name. And definitely not because of me. He earned that win, completely, undeniably, on his own. I thought maybe that would be it. That we'd settle into this new rhythm, Lucas staying on, shoulder to shoulder, not just as my brother but as a teammate I could trust. But life doesn't always stick to the script you write in your head. About 6 months ago, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, he texted me. Said he wanted to grab a coffee. Same place as before. Same corner table where we'd had the hard talk all those months ago. As soon as the coffee arrived, he got right to it. "I'm resigning," he said. "I'll send my letter tomorrow. Can you help push it through?" I blinked. Questions hit me all at once. Why now? Was something wrong? Had something happened? Eventually, I just asked him. Why? He didn't look away. Didn't fidget or shift in his seat. "I've made up my mind," he said. "I want to build something of my own. A new direction. A clean start." Then he paused, just for a second, before adding, "Would you help me? As an advisor, maybe an investor?" I let out a long breath. Truth was, the thought of him leaving felt like I was losing a part of my own foundation. He'd become someone I leaned on heavily in our leadership team. But deep down, I understood. He had his own fire to follow now. His own path to chase. And I couldn't let my own fear of change get in the way of that. So I nodded. "Yeah," I told him. "I'll help. Not because you're my brother. But because you've earned the chance." And this time, he wasn't running away from a shadow. He was stepping into something that was fully, completely his. 2 months later, Lucas officially launched his company. That morning, Jenna and I brought the girls and arrived early at the new office, a small but inviting space tucked in the heart of Midtown. Clean. Organized. Intentional. The kind of place built not for flash, but for focus. You could tell, this wasn't just a startup. It was something meant to grow roots. On the glass front door hung a simple, solid sign. Straight as point. Inside, the guest list was tight. Just a few close friends, new team members, and a couple of early partners. The ceremony kicked off right on time. After a short intro, the MC called Lucas to the front. He stepped out slowly, dressed in a sharp gray suit, hair neat, posture relaxed, but there was something different about him. He still looked like the brother I'd always known. Only now, he saw himself differently. Lucas took the mic, gave a small nod to the crowd, and paused. He let the silence breathe before he spoke. "Thank you all for being here today." His voice was calm. Measured. The kind of voice that belongs to someone who's let go of pretending. "Honestly," he said, "I never thought I'd have a moment like this." He smiled, a quiet one. The kind that only comes after shedding a lifetime of pride. "I thought I was doing fine. I thought I had it all figured out. I believed I didn't need to change." He looked out over the room. "Until someone came into my life who didn't say a single word. But the way he lived, made it impossible for me to keep lying to myself." He scanned the crowd slowly, until his eyes found mine. And when they did, he gave a small, deliberate nod. This wasn't just a thank you. It was an invitation. "Tom," he said, "if you don't mind, would you come up here for a moment?" So I stood. Not because I felt obligated. But because I knew, this was the first time he was speaking truly from the heart. And I needed to show up for that. When I reached the stage, Lucas turned toward me and gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't forced. It was small, but it meant everything. Then he turned back to the audience. No glances. No distractions. Just eyes forward and a voice full of clarity. "If it hadn't been for you," he said, "I'd still be holding on to a version of myself that doesn't fit anymore. You never gave me a speech. You never scolded me. You just lived the right way. And that, just watching you, was enough to show me I needed to change. He paused for a second. And this time, I heard it. That slight catch in his throat. Then he said the most honest words I'd ever heard him say. I know I haven't been a good brother. But if today is a beginning, then let me start it the right way, with a thank you. And a sincere, I'm sorry. The room erupted into applause. I turned toward him and pulled him in for a hug. Not one of those polite, stiff ones. This was real. Tight. The kind of hug that tells you everything has shifted. And right then, I knew. He wasn't pretending. He had truly changed. After that, the energy in the room softened. People relaxed. Conversations picked back up. Lightness returned. A few folks came up to shake Lucas's hand. A couple stopped by to congratulate me. But I could tell, for him, those handshakes weren't the part that mattered. It was what happened just before. On that stage. With those words. About half an hour later, Jenna and I gathered the kids and slipped out early. Lucas was still deep in conversation with a few new partners. We didn't exchange any more words. Just a quiet nod as we passed, his way of saying goodbye. And that was enough. It's been 4 months since my brother launched his own company. Things are running steady, for both of us. And today, I'm sharing all of this, not to show off. Not to impress. But because I know there are so many people out there who've lived this same story in their own way. Maybe it's your brother. Maybe it's a cousin. A coworker. A friend. A parent. Someone you've been compared to over and over, until the line between who they are and who you're supposed to be starts to blur. If that's you, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. Don't waste your life trying to meet someone else's idea of enough.